I never planned to stop that afternoon. The desert road was long, pale, and empty, stretching like a promise no one kept. I was hauling grain east, thinking only about water, shade, and how many miles I could still push before dark. Then I saw her standing near the bend, black shawl pulled tight, hair braided, eyes steady as the land itself. She didn't wave, she didn't beg, she simply stood there, as if she already knew I would slow down. I told myself I was just being decent. A lone woman on that road could mean trouble for anyone with a conscience. I pulled the reins, dust settling around us, and asked where she was headed. Her English was careful but clear. She said her husband had died 3 moons ago. She said she was Apache. She said she needed to reach her husband's brother's camp before nightfall. I nodded and helped her up onto the wagon bench, keeping a respectful distance. She thanked me once, then sat silent, eyes forward. For miles, the only sound was the wagon wheels and the wind whispering through scrub. I noticed the way people did not notice her, how the desert seemed to bend around her presence, as if she belonged to it more than I ever could. When the sun dipped low, she finally spoke again. She asked my name. I told her. She repeated it softly, tasting it, then said hers, Nalan. Widow of Kachina's son. Her voice carried no sorrow, only fact. I didn't ask questions. Some stories announce themselves when ready. We stopped near a stand of mesquite to rest the horses. As I climbed down, she remained seated, hands folded. Then she said words that tightened my chest. She told me that by Apache law, a man who carried a widow alone, who shared her path and protection, accepted responsibility. That once night fell, he became bound. Not for a season, not for convenience, forever. I laughed, sure I had misunderstood. Laws like that belonged to old tales, not the rough, practical world I lived in. She didn't smile. She explained calmly that her people held to what kept them whole. A widow could not wander unclaimed, safety came with belonging. If a man took her under his care without refusing, he agreed to stand in her husband's place. I said I was sorry, but I couldn't be bound by a law I didn't follow. She nodded, as if expecting that answer. Then she said something that turned my blood cold. She said refusing now would mark her as rejected, a shame worse than hunger. She said she would walk into the night alone, and the law would judge her, not me. I looked at the horizon. Darkness was already reaching for us. I thought of my quiet cabin, my solitary life, the way I'd chosen distance because it was simpler than loss. I thought of leaving her there, the weight of it pressing on my ribs. And I thought of the strange certainty in her eyes when she first saw me slow down. I told her she could stay the night. Just the night. We would part ways at dawn. She nodded again, accepting the words without arguing. But something in her stillness told me that dawn would not free me as easily as I hoped. That night, the fire crackled between us. She spoke of her husband, of how he'd died protecting horses from raiders. She spoke of duty as if it were breath itself. I listened, realizing too late that my silence had already chosen for me. When the stars rose high and the desert held its breath, I understood that giving her a ride had never been the decision. Stopping had been. Morning came quietly, as if the desert itself was watching to see what I would do. Nalan rose before me, tending the fire, offering me water without a word. I told myself I would take her as far as the next settlement and leave her there, where no law, hers or mine, could follow. But when I hitched the horses, she did not climb down. She took her place beside me. Hands folded, eyes forward, already certain of our direction. As we rode, she explained more. Among her people, law was not written, it was lived. A widow did not belong to herself alone. She belonged to the balance of the tribe. A man who sheltered her took on her past and her future. I argued, clumsily, that I had never agreed. She answered gently that agreement was not always spoken. Some choices were made by action alone. By midday, we reached a trading post. Men stared. Women whispered. Nalan stepped down and spoke to an elder there, her voice steady, recounting the journey, naming me as the man who had taken her under his care. The elder studied me with eyes that weighed more than words. He nodded once, as if something had been set in place. I felt trapped, angry at a law I hadn't known, at myself for not writing on. Yet when I looked at Nalan, there was no triumph in her face. Only relief. Safety. The simple easing of a burden I hadn't realized she carried so heavily. That night, we shared a roof. Not a bed, she insisted on distance until I chose with my heart what the law had already declared. She told me she would leave if I wished, that she would face whatever judgment came. But I could see what leaving meant. I could see the way the world treated women without protection. I could see how much courage it had taken for her to stand by the road alone. Days passed. I learned her rhythms, her quiet strength, the way she laughed softly at small kindnesses. She learned my silences, the reasons I'd chosen to live alone after burying too many names. Somewhere between shared meals and shared work, the anger loosened its grip. When Apache riders came to confirm the bond, I stood before them and spoke honestly. I said I had not known the law, but I would not dishonor a woman who trusted me with her life. They listened. They accepted. The bond was sealed not with ceremony, but with recognition. That night, Nalan sat beside me under the stars. She told me marriage, to her people, was not about possession but protection. Two lives walking the same road so neither walked it alone. I realized then that the law I feared was not a chain, but a call to be more than I had allowed myself to be. Time has a way of softening sharp beginnings. Months passed, and the desert that once felt like a boundary became our home. Nalan brought her ways into my life, stories told by firelight, prayers whispered to the earth, a patience that steadied my restless thoughts. I brought her what I had, shelter, work, the promise that she would never face the road alone again. There were moments of doubt. Nights when I wondered if love born of law could ever be real. But love, I learned, is not always a sudden flame. Sometimes it is built, day by day, through choosing to stay. Through listening. Through honoring a promise you never meant to make, but keep anyway. When her people visited, they saw not a captive man, but a willing one. They saw how we moved together, how decisions were shared, how respect flowed both ways. The law had bound us, yes, but it had also revealed us to each other. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the land gold, Nalan took my hand and asked if I regretted stopping that day. I thought of the road I might have taken, empty and safe and alone. I thought of the woman who had stood there, trusting fate and law and a stranger's mercy. No, I said, and in that moment, I knew forever was not a sentence. It was a gift I had almost passed by.